and I crashed my car. And I was banned from driving. Now, at the time, I didn't realise what this meant, but it was a really, really serious thing, particularly for me, and it was a real cry for help. I didn't see it at that point. Now, oh yeah, I've written completely out of character on here, just because it's important that you know that this was something that was really, really unusual for me. So I was a really good kid. I didn't do things like this. This was a very, very odd thing to happen. Now, when I was about 19, after my first year at university, it wasn't at this university, it was at a different one, I'd really, really struggled throughout the year. And I was really, really worried about going back. And there were all sorts of things that piled up. And in the summer of 2012, I made a suicide attempt. It landed me in hospital. I took a massive overdose of paracetamol, and I really wasn't very well for a while. At that point, I was diagnosed with depression and social anxiety. That's where my diagnosis came from, and I started treatment. Now, that was 4 years ago now, and I'm still in weekly therapy. That puts that into a little bit of perspective for you. Now, what I'd like to think about, I promised that I'd tell you about why the conference matters. What I'd like to think about is that story, that which ended in me attempting suicide. I made an attempt on my own life. I'd like to think about looking back, what if things had been different? What if, when I was 18, my old university had noticed that I wasn't really attending, they'd noticed that I was struggling, my personal tutor had noticed that something was wrong. What if, when I crashed my car, people had seen it and recognised it as a cry for help and started to look at things at that point? What if, when my old doctor asked me those questions, he followed up, he worded them in a nice way, he made me feel welcome and understood that this might be depression that might need looking after in the long term? What if, when I'd been 13 and I'd gone to secondary school and I'd stopped really working, my parents had noticed that and they'd realised what that meant? What if they'd been part of a culture that knew what mental illness was? Now, my parents are here in the audience today, and I'm very grateful to them for everything that they've done, but things could have been different if they'd been part of a different culture. So, if those things had happened, would I have tried to take my own life? And that's why it's really important that as a culture we understand mental health and we're aware of it and we talk about it. Because if we don't, it can be a really bad thing. Okay? Now, I've realised that Natalie forgot to mention toilets, so to end that really slightly heavy bit of discussion, I'll tell you about toilets. As you come out of here, the way that I'm facing you, so to your right, my left, as you come out on the left as you go out are some toilets, and as you go onto the first floor, where a lot of the sessions are, as soon as you go up the stairs, there's toilets on your left, near where the room called the lounge is. So, I hope you enjoy the conference. I'm sorry if this has put you off a little bit, but I promise you it gets better. Natalie, would you like to take it from here?
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I'm sorry, I forgot about the toilets. Not very good with directions, but hopefully you'll all find them. We're actually back on time now, just about, which is perfect. So I'm going to introduce our keynote, Mark Brown, and I really like this description of him, which his friend and colleague has told me this morning. He describes him as a journalist, opinion former, and provocateur. I think that's really good. So I'm going to welcome Mark Brown.
Right, can everyone hear me? Does that work? Can you hear me at the back? Give me a wave if you can hear me. Is that, yeah, is that fine? Right, well, apparently I am a provocateur, so that's a good thing. So my name's Mark Brown, and I've been given the job today of talking to you about mental health and technology. To do that, I'm going to have to talk about presents, pasts, and futures. I got into doing mental health stuff because of my own experiences. I was very ill when I was young. I had a disastrous attempt at trying to get a degree. Did the first year of a degree twice, and then was unemployed. I still have mental health difficulties now. That's not in my past, they're in my present, and will probably be in my future too. I didn't have my first email address until I was 23. Didn't have a laptop of my own until I was 30. I missed the dot-com bubble completely. When I first got the internet at home, I started to share fiction I'd written on a website that I eventually ended up editing for a job. In 2006, I started a magazine called 1 in 4 that was written by people with mental health difficulties for people with mental health difficulties. We did that for 7 years. It nearly killed us. Some people liked it, some people didn't, but it didn't make any money whatsoever. So I'd been inspired to start the magazine by reading blogs written by other people with mental health difficulties back in sort of 2004, 2005. So trying to keep the money coming in to keep the magazine going, I ended up doing lots of different mental health things. And that did two things for me. The first was that it gave me an opportunity to speak to lots of people about mental health. And it gave me a chance to work on stuff that might change things for us, people with mental health difficulties. So in 2009, I joined Twitter, and somehow, as Mark 1 in 4, I ended up with thousands of followers and the opportunity to see what social media was making happen. It was making it possible for people like us, people with mental health difficulties, people who've experienced things, to have conversations with each other and find the ways that we had things in common and the ways that we differed. Just watching what happens when people can finally find each other and ideas that might not have been available to them in their street or their town has been incredible. What I also found out was that changing things in mental health is really, really hard, wonderful social media aside. And one of the reasons for that is we find it very, very difficult to think about futures in mental health. There was a time when I thought I didn't have a future. There are times when I still don't think I've got a future. Living a life with mental health difficulty can rob us of a sense of the future, reduce us to living from moment to agonising moment. So that's why I think the future is important. To live in a big long now and to accept that nothing is ever going to be better is a kind of exquisite torture. So this is what led me to technology as a way to make change happen for people who experience mental health difficulties. It's really because I want a better future and I want things to change. So in talking to you today, I want to put together a kind of toolkit for ways of thinking about what technology might do for mental health, reasons why those things aren't happening, ways that you can help to make it happen, and also ways that you can help to keep yourself going as you make your preferable futures happen, if, like me, you're a bit mental as well. So first up, it's useful to kind of set up a framework to help us to think about the future of mental health. Futurists or futurologists are people who have the job of making guesses about what the future is going to be like. They usually do this by studying the present and then trying to discern the way things are going. I'm not a futurist, but my time spent doing mental health stuff has given me the opportunity to look pretty hard at the present world and the way it does or doesn't help people have the lives that they should reasonably expect. Futurists often use a relatively simple way of trying to understand the future and what it might hold, so they can make better guesses. They deal in three kinds of futures. They deal in probable futures, possible futures, and preferable futures. Probable futures are the futures that seem likely to happen if nothing major changes from now. They're about extrapolating from present events. They're the futures that are like now, but more. Possible futures are the kind of futures you explore by being playful and mucking about. Sometimes they're explored through stories or films or art or imagination or science fiction. They're the futures that we use to look at how bad or how good or how weird the future might be. They're the visions of the future where we explore our desires that look at how one particular thing might change everything. It's the jetpacks and flying cars future, if you like. The future that we try to see, the future that we try on to see how it makes us feel. Possible futures are where we try out our what-ifs for size. Preferable futures are the kind of the big one. Preferable futures are somewhere between a probable future and a possible future. Preferable futures are the ones that we look at and think, yeah, that's the future we're trying to get to. Preferable futures are the ones that we try to bring about by taking decisions and taking actions now, bending the path of the future away from the things that we think will definitely happen if we don't do anything and just let things unfold. A preferable future is the one you get to by playing through a possible future and playing through a probable one and thinking, how do we get closer to what we want to happen rather than what will happen anyway? So the probable future for mental health has never looked more worrying. Levels of illness and levels of distress are rising, while all we have is the same old suggestions and the same diminishing pool of ideas. There isn't a past for mental health to return to. Things weren't better in the old days. We have to face the future. I recently spoke at an event about mental health and digital technology. I told the audience, we're in the middle of the biggest rollback of public spending in generations. In the form of Brexit, we're embarking on the biggest experiment in leaping into the geopolitical and economic unknown that our country has seen in at least a lifetime. In mental health, we can often assume that the world we see around us will always look the same as it does now. That institutions like the one we're sitting in will always be here. That there'll always be an NHS. That there'll always be social care. There'll always be human rights, always be helplines, always be homes and jobs and opportunities. I think right now we can be certain of no such thing. This is what makes the job all the more important and desperate. In much of the adult mental health world, our possibilities have been plateauing, either because we've gotten everything we can out of a particular technique or treatment, or because the public and political will to provide those techniques and treatments has flatlined. There is nothing traditional on the horizon that will save us from failing people with mental health difficulties in worse and more painful ways in the future than we have been doing today. The winter is coming. Now, that might seem gloomy, and that's because it's meant to be. That's because that's the future, where none of us get to influence what happens, and where the problems we have now don't get solved and just keep getting worse. It's the most likely future if we don't start doing things now. That's the future we have to fight against. So we're going to have a look at possible futures and work out what kind of future we prefer. And the seeds of possible futures for mental health and technology are all around us if we get used to looking for them. For example, I stand before you as a kind of cyborg. I have already given over much of my life as a person who experiences mental health difficulties to being assisted by machines. Every day I rely on digital technologies to offset my cognitive deficits, help me to plan and manage my time, stop me getting lost between appointments, to keep up with important information, to make it possible for me to work in conditions that don't exacerbate my condition, and to make it possible to communicate with people. Without this technology, I have to travel long distances to do important tasks. I'm at risk of missing out on important, vital information for my well-being. I'm in danger of losing my job through a lack of adaptation and lack of effectiveness. Through finding the right combination of digital technologies, I've become far more able, far more independent, and far more able to take part in my community. It's giving over myself to this technology, becoming a mixture of person and machine, that has got me where I am today, standing in front of all of you. So it sounds amazing and complex. What is this special mental health technology? It is my phone. It's my simple, cheap, 80 quid Chinese knockoff smartphone. My very smartphone, my very cheap smartphone, has basically turned me into a pound shop Robocop, stomping around, obeying its orders. It's just a combination of stuff like calendars, email, maps, and the ability to store and work with documents online. All of the amazing stuff that an average cheap laptop and a rubbish phone make possible, when I can get online, has changed my life. I don't need to commute to the office, my phone reminds me of appointments, Twitter and other social media keeps me in touch with people and what's happening. Nothing specialist at all there. Nothing specifically mental health intended. Just basic stuff that everyone has if they've got a computer or a smartphone. Just useful digital tools that I use to solve problems that I have and to offset my cognitive deficits and mitigate the effects of my mental health difficulty. These everyday non-specialist apps and functions are often the difference between me being able to do my job and not being able to do my job at all. They aren't even designed with a specialist mental health purpose in mind, but make a massive difference to me and my well-being. Now, imagine we started to develop digital apps and services or to use digital tools in a way that would solve specific problems that people with mental health difficulties actually experience, or to use digital technologies to provide new options for people to access the help we provide in a way that suits them. So there's one possible future, a world where digital technology designed specifically for the problems that people with mental health difficulties have in their lives is available to all and makes life better for people who want to use it. It doesn't sound like too much to ask, does it? Well, let's have a look at that. There's a weird thing that happens when we talk about technology and mental health difficulty. Conversation always gets sidetracked. It's like we can't keep our eyes on the target of doing things with technology that make people's lives better in the here and now. And we always end up talking about how we can do treatment via computers and apps. There are a number of reasons why this happens, all of which are human problems, not machine problems. There are 3 myths that hold people back thinking about technology to make life for people with mental health difficulties better. The first myth is that technology is exclusive and excludes people. The second is that technology is complicated for its users. The third is that technology can never understand the needs of people with mental health difficulties. So, myth 1, technology somehow excludes people. There's a weird paradox with digital technology. It feels like it's been around forever and also that it's really new. That's because we've been living through a period of technological acceleration where certain advances in technology have made things move much more quickly than they have done in the past. This leaves us confused about the extent to which certain technologies are new and exclusive and which ones are common and widely accepted. Televisions, for example, stayed the same, roughly, for about 30 years as big square boxes that sat in the corner of the room. They went from being covered in wood panels, as all good 70s technology was, to being a kind of silver, shiny or classy matte black thing that was there, but they were basically the same. They had the same shape. Then very quickly, that technology became obsolete when cheaper ways of showing repeats of bargain hunt and the Jeremy Kyle show won out. But we're still kind of confused as to when that particular technology actually arrived. You can hear this in the way that certain right-wing political rhetoric still talks about the flat screen television as if it was the height of high-tech luxury. On benefits, but can still afford a flat screen television. As if a flat screen television is new and preserves some kind of technological mega rich elite. Don't know if anyone's tried to buy a television. You can't buy a television that isn't a flat screen anymore. So for some people, it feels like this very, very common, increasingly cheap technology has just arrived. For the rest of us, it feels like somehow it's been here forever. It's weird to think about just how recent, though, the things in technology that make our conversations about technology and mental health feel real. It's really weird to think about just how recent they are. The iPhone was released on June the 29th, 2007 in the United States. The first commercially available smartphone running Android was released at the end of 2008 in the US. The first iPad, and this one always surprises me, the first iPad was released on April the 3rd, 2010. It feels like they're much older somehow, but also kind of much newer. And Android and Windows tablets followed soon afterwards. In the UK, we had 3G mobile networks able to carry enough information quickly, enough to make mobile internet use possible. We've had that since 2004. We had 4G from 2008. So digital technology became mobile, and as importantly, it all plummeted in price. In fact, we got to the point now where tablet and mobile sales are beginning to slow down, mainly because the UK is awash with devices that are just good enough, and people don't see the necessity in upgrading, or they pass their old devices to friends, families, or they sell them at a cash converter. So I'm sick, really, really sick of sitting on panels talking about digital technology and mental health. And there's always someone from the audience sticks their hand up and says, yeah, but what about people who don't have access to technology? Aren't we excluding them? And my answer to them is always this. I think the statistics indicate that most people now have access to digital technology if they want it. I think you're afraid of the changes digital might make to people's lives. So I'm right on the statistics. According to Ofcom, in the first quarter of 2016, 81% of adults in the UK had fixed or mobile broadband. 66% of people in the first quarter of 2016 used their mobile handset to access the internet. Although it does matter who does and doesn't access the internet and use devices. According to the Office for National Statistics, as of May 2016, 25% of disabled adults had never used the internet. But almost all adults between 16 to 24 years old were recent internet users, with 99.2% of them using the internet recently, which is in contrast to the 38.7% of adults aged 75 and older who've used the internet. So basically, digital technology isn't going to go away. However, there is one way that digital technology excludes people like me with mental health difficulties, but I'll get onto that in a bit. Going back to the person in the audience, sticking the hand up, I have said on at least one occasion, unless you want to find out who the people are who don't use digital technology and why they aren't, and whether they actually want to use it or not, I'm going to conclude that it's probably you that isn't interested in the possibilities of digital technology, and you're just speaking on the behalf of them and making a decision for them. And that was them told. So, just got a quick mouthful of water. That's the bit where it usually explodes. So the second myth is that digital technology is complicated. Science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, writer of 2001 amongst many other things, wrote back in 1963, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And when you get something that's well designed, that's exactly what it feels like, a little touch of magic in your world. The gap between what you feel like you should be able to do using it and what you actually can do disappears. You stop even wondering how it does it. How many hours now has it took to develop it? And by what technological magic it happens? You just kind of go, ooh. And more usually, you just accept that it does what it does, and you start to show people the results of what it does. how it does it stops being important. A good app is one that does the thing that you want it to do in the way that you expect it to. The right technology with the wrong interface is the same as the wrong technology. It might take a huge amount of time working with people and testing and failing and rethinking and trying again, all hugely complicated work to be done, but in the end, the objective is to create something that just works. When we get tech right, that's what it does. It just works like magic. But how do we make sure that we get it right? This brings us to the largest myth about technology and mental health. Technology will never understand mental health. In mental health, we can fall into the trap of thinking that no one understands us and our needs. We believe it's our fault that we can't get on. We're failures at being human. In our mental distress, we're misshapes, bad programs, aberrations. Unlike other people with disabilities, we yearn to be let back into the normal world. Most of us yearn to pass, to be invisible, to be normal folks again. We, those in need, are expected to, and expect ourselves to, find within ourselves a reserve of energy, a magical pool hidden within the source of our being that will rejuvenate and fix us. Somehow we believe that one day we will be reborn, springing from the garbage of our disordered lives, glistening like stained glass butterflies, free of hideous misshape and larval stage of our mental health difficulty. Because we are often expecting not to have our needs met, it stops us from actually thinking about what the problems might be that we face in enough detail. This can prevent us from doing the most vital thing we can do in thinking about technology and mental health. It prevents us from actually formulating problems that people might solve. There's a way in which the world of being in mental health need is like the experiences of Joseph K. in Franz Kafka's The Trial. In the novel, Joseph learns that he's to stand trial for something he is not aware that he's done. Kafkaesque is often used to describe the baffling wheels within wheels of bureaucracy, something not unfamiliar to many of us who've lived with mental health difficulties, but there's something even more relevant for us in Joseph's experiences. As Joseph tries to make sense of the various confusing and perplexing orders and guidance he's given, he finds out something. He finds out that, having travelled through most of the elements of this arcane and perplexing legal system, that he's the only one that understands any of it, really. None of the individual cogs in the machine know anything beyond the tiny area illuminated by the role that they play in it. The machine's so big and so complex that no one Joseph meets even understands the shape of it or what its overall purpose is. It's him that makes things fit together. It ends up with him having the greatest understanding of what's going on because he has to live through all of the different elements of it. And that's where people with mental health difficulties are. We're the people that see most of the processes because we have to. We travel through each layer of the ways that society responds to mental health difficulty, and we see them all. No one profession sees all of the ways in which a mental health difficulty affects your life. It's like we're testing the world to see how friendly it is for people with mental health difficulty and mental distress by just moving through it. If there's any group of people who have the memory of mental health, it's us. But at the moment, we remain damned data. We remain as anecdote and afterthought, while the real proper world of professional mental health continues around us, occasionally consulting us. So we need to take the initiative. We need to work out together what our problems are. People who build software and work with technology are engineers. Engineers love solving problems. That's what engineers do. You set them a problem and they try to solve it. Today, a lot of the work in mental health and digital technology has been about solving medical problems. The pipeline has been from medical research to developer to end user. This has meant that the prism through which mental health tech has been viewed has been one defined by clinicians and medical researchers. Us civilians have been passive recipients, even though we're the people that's meant to be benefiting. This is like when your mum goes to buy a Coke for you. Yes, you will get a Coke from that interaction, but you can be damn sure that it will either A, get you beaten up on the way to school, B, look absolutely ridiculous when you pair it with some strappy shoes and a new dress, or C, if you're me, both. The assumption there is that lots and lots of statistical knowledge will translate into a great output service that works for people. And it doesn't. You can't design great things from abstracts. You design great things from understanding the problem that people have and the things they expect and the way they want to live their lives. You don't need to be able to come up with an app or a website yourself to come up with a really good problem that someone should solve. People do that for a living. You just have to help them to know where to direct their efforts. In fact, that's why digital technology is probably our best bet for better mental health, because we already know a lot about mental health. If we live with mental health difficulties, we know lots about our lives, and other people know a lot about tech, and also make a lot of money out of getting tech right. So we're already halfway there. Our direction of travel is that every year there'll be more breakthroughs in research in digital technology each year, which means if we carve out a space for mental health, in that we will reap the benefits of the direction of innovation that's already unfolding. In fact, The formula I would use for thinking about digital technology and innovation in mental health is knowing what kinds of cool stuff technology can do, plus thinking about small, well-defined problems equals ideas for possible digital solutions. Once you're looking at tech for possibilities, you start looking at life for problems, and you'll find yourself developing the habit of playing with ideas for new solutions or finding ways that existing tech might be applied to problems you know people have. Congratulations when you start doing that. You are now playing the possible futures game. Welcome, futurist. Achievement unlocked. Looking towards digital and mental health doesn't need to be about massive transformation. It just has to be about solving particular problems and solving them well. If we spend our time with people we care about, we will see problems without solutions all of the time. Looking at digital as a way of solving people's problems doesn't have to be massive. It gives us a chance to build things that might initially change the lives and health of a few people, then a few more, and then a few more. Sometimes the answer is a new thing, sometimes the answer is an old thing in a new way, or at a new time, or in a new place. Sometimes the answer turns out not to be digital at all. There's lots of techniques and structures for creating people-driven design that can help us to work them out. All of them go from working with people on a possible problem to testing whether you've really understood that problem by checking with them, then working with them to find a solution to that problem that works for them. I was lucky enough to work on an app called Doc Ready. It grew out of young people's experiences of going to see the GP and feeling that they hadn't been listened to. The young people initially said that what they really wanted was a device like something out of Star Trek that would translate young people's language into GP's language. This is a terrible idea, but it was an absolutely great problem. Traditional approaches to the problem always centered on telling young people what their rights were and teaching them about what GPs did, but it didn't help them to feel listened to. So Doc Ready did something different. It ended up just being a really, really simple web application that did one very, very simple thing. It got young people ready to visit the GP for the first time to talk about their mental health. The way it does that is that it's really simple. You select a category like feelings or thoughts or work from a little cloud of possible things, and it suggests to you some things that you might say to the GP about that. Once you've seen the kind of things you can talk about, you can also add your own. So all the app does is it helps you make a list of things you really want to tell the GP. So if you get embarrassed, you can show them the list. Or if you find yourself too polite to honestly answer the question, so what can I do for you today? You have something to give you encouragement. And that's all it does. We found from evaluating it that it works. People find it useful, and it solves a problem that people really do have. And we got to that thing that works by making sure we actually had the problem that people really had, and then meeting them regularly so they could tell us if the thing we were making to try and solve that problem actually fit the problem as they experienced it. We didn't need to know everything about mental health or general practice, we just needed to know that we're hitting the spot for those people. Other human problems we have in thinking about digital mental health are based on our thinking getting stuck in one way of seeing things, and sort of a way of seeing things that says that everything will always look the way it does now. A problem that happens a lot in the development of mental health technology is the creation of things that are called skeuomorphs. I saw a talk by David Moore, who's a researcher and person who does digital technology in the US. He was talking about the ways in which we've been getting tech and mental health wrong for decades, and he blames skeuomorphs, amongst other things, for that. Now, a skeuomorph happens when we recreate an existing thing in a new medium. So the best example of a skeuomorph are those chandeliers with electric bulbs that are made to look like little flickering candles. The electric bulbs don't need to look like flickering candles. They just do that because that's what we expect to be in chandeliers. And we do the same with mental health tech. We assume that we must make a recreation of something that already exists. So we get online therapy that lasts for 50 minutes and you have to do it sitting down at a laptop. Or we get electronic communication between patients and professionals that looks exactly like printed letters, or in my case, actually is printed letters that someone at the trust has scanned in and turned into a PDF. We get the shape of things confused with their purposes. And medical professionals can be very, very susceptible to this because they embody the shape of things as they are now. It's their very life and professional practice, and that stops them thinking about new ways of doing things. As David said, the average interaction with a smartphone is 15 seconds. So why do we keep building mental health apps that take 20 minutes or more to work through? It prevents us from actually making things that work for people, that are woven into the fabric of their everyday lives. The final problem we have in thinking about tech and mental health is that there's actually a fear of building enabling tools rather than curing people. For other disabled people, it's pretty well accepted that the world is designed for people who aren't disabled, and that's what makes them disabled. So building buildings without lifts is a problem, not that someone can't climb stairs. When it comes to mental health and technology, people have a weird knee-jerk reaction against technological aids. We know that different mental health symptoms and experiences cause different challenges or problems. Knowing that, we could, for example, we could write a word processor that recognises when your thoughts get jumbled. It's possible. Then we could remove some of the barriers for people who experience certain mental health symptoms at university. But when you start talking about that, you get this response, oh, we can't mollycoddle people. If we do things for them, they'll never learn. If we give people access to aids and assistance, then they'll have an unfair advantage over people who have to do it for themselves. If we do that, people will rely on the technology and never get better at things themselves. And so, on those rocks, there's an enthusiasm for changing the lives of people with mental health difficulties crash into thousands of tiny pieces. It's a ridiculous argument that we need to teach people with mental health difficulties to be better people in future, even if that stops them doing things in the here and now that would help them. We're all cyborgs now, to a lesser or greater extent. We all rely on technology. There's a fair chunk of you that wouldn't be alive now listening to this if it was not for the fruit of one technology or another. No one suggested I would lose my skill of cross-country perambulation by not walking from Newcastle to Leeds. How many of you are wearing glasses? How many of you have been in hospital for any reason? A fair proportion of us would have died before our 5th birthdays if it wasn't for technology. And this is in some ways a fundamental problem. Society at large is uncomfortable with the change technology might bring for people apart from themselves. This includes medical professionals. This is why we have such an amazing opportunity to begin to make digital technology that solves problems in people's lives, not the problems of services that are supposed to help us. So that's what's holding us back. We're scared of change. We're scared that we're not used to working out problems. We aren't used to playing. People sometimes don't want tech to happen if it challenges them, and there are people who would rather not think about tech at all. So, what cool stuff do we have to play with when we're thinking about a possible digital mental health future, and what might it look like? Just gonna have another glass of quick mouthful of water. It's all right for everyone, by the way. Is it working? It's just kind of a bit weird for a Saturday morning. You should probably all be hungover, as it is a bank holiday. So what cool stuff do we have to play with in thinking about what a possible digital mental health future might look like? With technology and mental health, we're still at the stage of wild Victorian patents. Apps and services are like steam-powered hairdressing machines or static electricity-powered trouser presses. We're in the first explosion of failed applications, a world of solutions to problems people don't have, and crankish nursed obsessions turned into patented devices and labour-saving miracles. iTunes and the Play Store are like the back pages of Victorian Penny Dreadful, filled with the equivalent of Worthington's miraculous patented coal-powered back massager, a boon for housewives, a bounty for the busy man, a tonic to the body and the mind. See tension has disappeared before its magnificent steam-powered touch. And this is actually where we should be at the minute, because really no one has a bloody clue what they're doing, because the future is coming into being. It's the unfolding present. It's not fixed yet. New technology is appearing more rapidly than ever before, and it's up to us to see how they might be applied to the problems that we face as people with mental health difficulties. Each year, information technology research and advisory company Gartner Inc. publishes the hype cycle for emerging technologies, where they track the various technologies that are coming out and where they are in their cycle of maturity. The cycle looks a bit like this. Right? Like that. It's basically like a roller coaster, beginning with a steep climb that leads up from the innovation trigger to the peak of inflated expectations. Technologies here are in the everyone throwing investment at them stage. Then, just like a roller coaster, these technologies speed down into the trough of disillusionment, which is where everyone realizes that no matter how cool it seemed about 6 months ago, no one can think of a reason that anyone might actually buy any of these things or use them. Then they climb back up, slowly, the slope of enlightenment, where people begin to see what technologies might actually be used or sold for, and then they finally pass out into what's called the cycle, pass out of the cycle into the plateau of productivity, where people can consistently see the point of them and are prepared to pay money for them. The cycle also estimates the time in years each technology is away from mainstream adoption. In 2006, on the way up, were things like the connected home, smart robots, and virtual personal assistants. They were climbing up to the peak of inflated expectation. On the way down were autonomous vehicles, augmented reality, and climbing the slope of enlightenment was virtual reality. The hype cycle shows that the gap between initial promise and things actually being used by lots of people can be large. Touchscreens, for example, were in the trough of disillusionment for about 20 years, until the iPhone and the iPad made them things that people understood that they wanted. That's why it's great that there's so much weird and strange tech about, because that's where the seeds of the possible future are. At the beginning of 2016, independent health charity think tank the King's Fund published an article listing 8 digital technologies that they feel will revolutionise health and care. The authors, Cosima Gretton and Matthew Honeyman, divided the article between technologies that are on the horizon and those that are already in our pockets, our local surgeries and hospitals. The list included such possibly dystopian science fiction stuff as tablets that would tell doctors when they've been swallowed, and possibly more benign stuff like digital controlled implants for releasing medication on command from an implant, and cheaper, quicker genome sequencing to better understand how different people might react to different medications. But interestingly, top of their list in 2016, for the thing that was most likely to change health and care was another one of these. It was a smartphone again. See, it's not just me that thinks they're amazing. A smartphone is ultimately a tiny, powerful computer that is very, very good at sending and receiving data and interfacing with other things. It's a basic platform that things can sit on, can be coordinated by an interface, and also it sometimes receives phone calls. In the main though, the smartphone is an amazing thing for health because unlike just about every other health intervention, we absolutely love our phones. We value them, we look after them, we carry them around, we pay attention to them even without being asked. The smartphone, as a portable computer, can be a springboard for lots of other things which are good news for our future. Other entries on the list from the King's Fund include something that they called at-home portable diagnostics, which was the use of particular bits of kit on their own in conjunction with other devices like smartphones to provide diagnostics, readings or measurements that can help professionals and patients interpret the results. A familiar example of this is something like blood glucose monitors for diabetes. The authors also included a lot of smart assistive technologies in this category. Lots of people use devices and apps to help them do things they want and need to do. With the addition of sensors and ways of communicating the data they produce, these things can be used to kind of track people and learn about their behaviour. So you've got things like Internet of Things cutlery that knows it's being used. So if you have an older relative, their knife and fork will tell you on your smartphone whether they've been eating their dinner or not. Or there's lots of examples of that. But the thing is that it's not always clear whether people would actually want their walking stick to grass them up for not going for a walk, or whether they want their inhaler telling their doctor that they just have a cheeky fag. So there's kind of a weird thing about these technologies aren't good or bad, it depends on how they're used. Also on the King's Fund list were digital therapeutics. These are the health and social care interventions delivered wholly or mostly on computers, tablets or smartphones. Mental health's rife with these interventions. Everyone's trying to crack the model for delivering evidence-based psychological therapies at scale using digital services. To my mind, I don't think anyone's quite managed it yet. They also included machine learning in their things that were coming. If you ever use Google, you'll have noticed that over the last few years it's gotten better at guessing what it is that you're searching for or what you're asking it to do. This is because Google's learning from the inputs that people use interacting with it. Machine learning is about programs that are set up to process data and to find things in the data that haven't been specifically asked for. They find things that no one's asked them to discover. Machine learning means that programs used to recognize things can begin to spot new patterns not obvious to human observers, or to make suggestions about new things that it's being shown based on previous things it's seen. There's a lot of machine learning stuff going around at the moment. If any of you have used Google Photos, you'll know that if you upload any of your snaps to Google Photos, you can search them using words. So on Google Photos, you can type in cat, and Google Photos guesses which of your photographs has a cat in it. And it's really, really good, and it works. Or you can type in house, or table, or selfie, and it'll guess. From what it knows, what it's learned from everyone else's photos, it'll guess what you're looking at. And most of the time it's right. And when it's wrong, it's really funny, because you can see how it's gone wrong. So it makes those guesses based on things it's seen in the past. The implication there is if we have programs to look at data for patterns, we'll end up with programs that make guesses when exposed to new data. So we could, if we wanted to, instigate the biggest ever study in the side effects of psychiatric medication. People are already using wearables that track their heart rate, their activity, their sleep, things like Fitbit and stuff. We could just say, hey, people, contribute all of that data to us along with what medication you're taking, then we'll try and see what it tells us. We could find out ways of personalising dosage in mental health medication that way. People could generate that data for themselves and then hand it over willingly in all of its complexity for others to make sense of. Like it happens in the citizen science movement, where people put up homemade weather stations in the garden to collect local level climate data. Gretton and Honeyman also included connected communities as a big health and care impact. So given that social media and apps and services for social functions now bring us together, what they're saying is basically the fact that the internet lets us get together might actually be really good for our health. So if we combine Gretton and Honeyman's list of at-home portable diagnostics, digital therapeutics, machine learning, and connected communities and the smartphone, what you end up with is basically the potential for digital technology to fill in many of the spaces where healthcare finds it difficult to reach, especially focusing on the bits of people's lives that don't take place in hospital consulting rooms. And basically, unless we're really unlucky, that's 99.9% of our life. Other things that I've seen recently that were cool were a project using virtual reality to help people who hear voices speak back to their persecutory voices using virtual reality. I saw an app that used machine learning to recognise facial expressions to help doctors tell the difference between kids with ADHD and autistic kids, so they could make better diagnoses, because often doctors get confused between that. It's using how they make facial expressions to make those guesses. I saw a project that was using technology like Amazon and Alexa to support people experiencing hallucinations and jumbled thinking and depression at home. So kind of being a reality check and feeding things back to them. And I also saw Paro the robot seal, which is this beautiful cuddly robot seal that when you cuddle it, it purrs and it looks you in the eye and it blinks and it talks to you. And that was amazing because it made me feel really sad because I missed my cat and I tried to steal it and he wouldn't let me. So we've got all this tech that's amazing, the future's going to be saved, right? Well, not quite. Remember I mentioned that there were ways that tech discriminates against us, people with mental health difficulties? Well, it does. Tech discriminates against anyone it doesn't think is important. Tech follows the money. It looks for the problems where it sees markets. Things climb out of that trough of disillusionment when people find markets for them. And at the moment, you and me, if we have mental health difficulties, aren't seen as enough of a big market. So there are two things we have to be thinking about here. We have to be thinking about diversity and we have to be thinking about external pressure. Digital technology is still the preserve of tech bros. And tech bros don't have the same problems you or I do. They work in tech, they have access to money, they tend to be healthy. But not all of them, of course, because the strong thread of mental health difficulty runs through tech, but big tech chooses not to care, really. Just it doesn't really care about racism or sexism or harassing members of the press. But the tech bros either solve the problems that tech bros like them have, like quicker pizza delivery or not wanting to do their laundry, or they messianically decide that they know the best way to do something and they try and solve a social problem they neither understand properly nor have experienced. They constantly ask, could we? And it's up to us to push back and say, should we? That's why we need to have as many non-tech bros and tech as possible to make sure that tech bros don't just make a world for other tech bros. This we do by taking ourselves and our identities and our problems into those spaces. We can also do it from outside. Things don't change without external competition or pressure. It's up to us to be advocates for better mental health tech, more diverse mental health tech. And it's up to us to start pushing possible and preferred futures forward. The main reasons things do not change in mental health is because the voice for change is quiet. We have to be demanding a better future. Our best voices on our tech futures come from people who aren't tech bros. Go read Gabriella Coleman and Hackers Anonymous. Go read Sarah Lacey at Panda on Silicon Valley. Go read Dana Boyd on social media. Not paying attention to the digital technology doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that the digital technology in mental health will be built by people who understand the people-sized problems of mental health difficulty far less well than we do. That's where we need to stay at that table, get our head around the possibilities, and think about things that people need to happen, and use our influence to make those things happen. So I've explored a bit about technology, a bit about mental health, a bit about what's coming up, and a bit about what's around now. So set out where we might take our place in making this future happen. All of this is based on the promise of the future, of finding ways to make sure that the most probable future doesn't happen, and that the things we want to happen do happen. But how do we keep ourselves going into that future? How do we find the strength to turn around and face that future? Writing about a painting by Paul Klee, Walter Benjamin talks about the angel of history, wings outspread, being blown into the future, forever facing backwards. So Walter Benjamin wrote, his face is turned towards the past. Where we perceive a chain of events, he sees one single catastrophe that keeps piling wreckage upon wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. The angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, and make whole what has been smashed. But a storm is blowing from paradise, and it's got caught in his wings with such violence that the angel can no longer close them. This storm irresistibly propels him into the future, to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. This storm is what we call progress. That's what we often are when we're talking and thinking about technology and change. We feel that we can only see what's lost, what came before, and that we can't even turn to face what might come next, because instead of knowing where we've been and being certain, we'll be carried away into something where we'll be insecure, at risk, and at risk of being wrong. The debate about technology and mental health often focuses on what might be lost, not what we might find. Technology's helped us to find each other. Technology's helped us to understand who we are. Technology's helped us to learn more and see more. In my case, it's helped me to be more. But people are still facing the wrong way. But more than that, often we find ourselves facing backwards, looking at our own past when we think about our own mental health, unable to see a way to the future. Like the angel of history, we just see the wreckage of our past mistakes, stopping us travelling back to when everything was okay, before we messed up, before our heads fell to bits. Last year I wrote a piece for a mental health scene, an open letter to anyone growing up mental. I'm old now, I'm doing this mental health stuff for years, so indulge me. It's a little guide to finding a way of facing the future when you feel like the future has been erased, when you feel that never mind a world, and you feel like there's basically nothing's ever going to make your life better. This little open letter is called Just. I'm going to have a quick mouthful of water and then I'm going to read it to you. Is that all right, everyone? Cool. So this is my little open letter to anyone growing up mental. I'm lucky. The time I spent ill wasn't amazingly long. The rooms full of rubbish and rotting food and unwashed clothes and ribs like clenched fists under my pale skin did not last for years. The terror and loss and ache in my chest and the days and days spent in bed, trapped in the smell of myself, were not infinite. The scars are not too numerous and, in the end, never getting a degree hasn't mattered too much. I found people and I found help, and then I found different people and different help. I'm still finding people and I'm still finding help. I was 23 when I first received a diagnosis of bipolar 2. Like me, you'll spend most of your life looking for a name to explain the thing that you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and then you'll find it even longer trying to escape from it once it's been named. You look at other people as if you were on a ship pulling out into a dark, rumbling sea surrounded by mist. You'll fall in love with the romantic image of yourself, lonely and slowly waving at everyone else happy on the shore. As a teen, you'll find it hard to know if you're unwell or weird or angry or fed up. Other people will find it hard to tell too. And there'll be shame and there'll be embarrassment at things you did do, things that you didn't do. At times you'll feel so heavy with horror at your own actions, you want to fall into the heart of a star or burrow deep into the mouldy, wormy earth. There'll be times when your thoughts aren't your own, when what you see and hear and feel isn't what others see, feel and hear, and you'll be terrified. There'll always be people who are having far more upsetting experiences than you, and people who are having problems that cause them less trouble than yours do. People will tell you that it doesn't matter, your life is your life. But you'll be tricked into thinking other people have it sorted, that you are just like them but gone wrong, like a plant growing the wrong way or a cake can't come out of the oven the wrong shape. In reality, it'll probably take you longer than them to find out what the right path for you is, because you'll be forced down paths you never choose to travel. Some of you will find out you're gay or bi or something else. Some of you will find out you're straight. Along the way, you'll make friends, and you'll lose friends. Some of you will lose your religion, and some of you will find it. There'll be births and deaths and dramas. Some of you will end your life a different gender to where other people thought you began. There'll be times when you'll desperately hide what's going on in your head, and there'll be times where you're desperate to let it out and it won't come. There'll be other times when you'll think you have it all under control, but to everyone around you, it'll be obvious as a clown makeup or an extra limb. You'll spend years looking for it, that intangible sense that you're allowed to be who you are and that there's a space in the universe for you. Some of you will find it in the eyes of your first child, or in a kiss behind your ear from your lover. You might find it in the contemplation of God, or in the dirtiest joke in the world. It'll hit you one day, slipping to the corner shop in your pyjamas with fags and a paper, on a monotonous grey motorways drive, answering a text from a friend, shrieking in ecstasy at a sex party in a European suburb. It might be in work, it might be in everything but work. One day, maybe just for a minute, you'll feel it's okay to be me. It's okay to be who I am. That feeling will pass. Other less existential concerns will crowd in, but you'll remember it. That feeling of no longer having to be an apology. I'm 39 now. I still need a whole mess of help. I still fuck up. You'll all fuck up too, but you'll get better. Stuff might never go away, but you'll find a way of living through it, living around it, finding people to help you get through it. Eventually, you'll find a way of living with being you in all your terrible, horrible, gorgeous glory, and you'll be able to whisper to your past self, see, I told you you'd make it into the future. Just. So, that's what we must do to help make the future we need. We must first believe that there is one, and then we must turn to face it. We need to see that there is a future with us still in it. We need to look at possible futures, explore them, and try things out. We need to work out where we want to get to, where we want to be. And then we have to start taking action, taking risks, turning from accepting where we are and who we are, and finding out how we can make the future we need to happen. We need to make sure that the digital future for mental health is not made by people who don't care about us. Sometimes that'll be about doing, sometimes that'll be about speaking for ourselves, sometimes it'll be about making and helping situations where other people can speak and make and do. So I've only just scratched the surface of this topic today, although I've been talking for ages. Technology isn't going to go away, and neither is mental ill health and distress. We need this future, a better future, and we need to begin working on envisaging it now, because the world is full of people who want to make the future a worse one. So, who's up for getting started? That's me, thank you. Ooh, 10 minutes under time as well.
No, that was brilliant. Thank you for that, Mark. Thank you for doing that. I really enjoyed that personally. I particularly like Trough of Disillusionment, because it finally gives me a way to describe how most of my friends actually feel about me now. So that was really good. Speaking of technology, something we forgot to mention in the intro is we've got a Twitter hashtag going. If you use Twitter, please use the hashtag MindTheGap2017. If you just use the general Mind the Gap one, then it will go to some kind of London Tube thing, I don't know. But we've got the best one with 2017. So, to lead into the next couple of sessions, the first thing I'll tell you is that Mark's not done for the day. He's actually back on 3 till 4, I think it is. Yeah, as part of the Men and Mental Health panel, which is again going to be on in here 3 till 4. So make sure you come back for that one. That'll be the only session at that time. Now, the next sessions that we've got this next hour are meditation, one called Collaboration and Connectedness, coming together to combat difficult times, and can everyone just get over themselves, please? Doing it ourselves with all that entails. That's going to be upstairs in the history room, where you go all the way up the stairs and you turn right. We've got one that's exploring creative communication in dementia, and that's in that next door. We've also got a panel about to happen, the general student panel, which is going to be here. So if you're interested in those, please pick one of those rooms. There's volunteers dotted around in t-shirts that look like mine, or a blue version, who can guide you. We'll be trying to start those sessions by 11:05. So please try to get there for then. You've got a little bit of time to float around before that. Thank you all for coming. I hope you have a wonderful day. Following on from that next session, we've got another session, and then we've got lunch. I know that's the bit you're all here for, the free lunch. So that's 1 till 2. And then after that, we've got another set of sessions, and then we've got the final panel. So thank you for coming. Please pick a session, decide what you'd like to go along to. If you've got any questions, feel free to come and ask me or one of the other volunteers in the Mind the Gap t-shirts. And thank you. Have a nice day.